Okay, you guys, as promised, I am going to break down Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s natal chart and transits, okay? Because this guy has got some really, really powerful stuff coming through. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up his natal chart and I'm going to go through the strongest stuff that I see. I really don't want this to get super long. I'd like to wrap this up in about an hour. I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I see that a video is like 4 hours long, I don't want to watch it. So I'm going to try and make this about an hour long. So I'm just going to break down the basics of his natal chart. Then I'm going to show you this incredibly powerful transit that he's been experiencing this year. Kind of started back in April. And it will go on, I mean, really till like halfway through next year. Really, really powerful stuff coming through. Very specifically hitting the area of his life that rules over career and status and recognition. Okay. And then I will also show you the transits for November 5th, election day, applied to Robert F. Kennedy's natal chart. So this should be very, very interesting. I may end up, some of this stuff I say might go over some people's heads, unless you've been studying astrology for a while. There's probably going to be some things that I say that you might not process fully, but that's okay. Just follow along as best as you can. And for those of you who have been studying astrology, I'm super excited to show you what I see. I'm excited to show everybody what I'm seeing. It's just so incredibly fascinating to me. I will say this too before I get rolling with this. So I've already put one video out about Trump. I think I might do another one on him because that was just a little 20-minute video to break down what happened on July 13th with Trump. So I might do like a longer version to really show you guys, because he's got some powerful stuff coming through as well. Really, really powerful stuff. But the thing with Trump's is that they're a lot more unpredictable. There's a lot of Uranus energy coming through, which Uranus is very strange and throws things at us that are very unpredictable, but really powerful stuff for Trump as well. I will probably put out a video. We'll see how things go. Biden, I don't understand. I would hope that these people have astrologers. Clearly they don't. If they really thought Biden had a chance to win, because Biden's transits are they're not strong at all. They were in 2020, but they're not now. Okay. But I might put out a video about Kamala Harris's chart and transits as well. Again, I'll just kind of see how things are going. So keep your eyes out for those things. And I think I'll just leave it there. Oh, one more thing I do want to mention is that this not being super long, I have a friend, a dear sweet friend who's also an astrologer, and we keep saying, hey, let's do this together. Let's do it. But she hasn't had time. And so her and I might end up connecting and putting out something that's even more in depth. Okay, so there's that. Let's go ahead and get started with this. This is super exciting. First of all, if you are new here, I work with geocentric Western astrology. And with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of Robert F. Kennedy's birth based on his location. Now, of course, I have no way of saying with 100% certainty that Robert F. Kennedy was born on January 17th, 1954 at 5:32 p.m. in Washington, D.C. But this is what an internet search will show you. And so, but I will say this, obviously I wasn't there at his birth, so I can't say for sure. But this chart really fits him to a T. As some of you know, I'm also a medical astrologer, and I can see things in the chart. Robert F. Kennedy has got some sort of I don't know exactly what it is, but it's some sort of a neurological spasmodic condition. And that makes his voice a little shaky, and I can see that in the chart. That makes a lot of sense. So that's where I was like, you know what, I say with some pretty good confidence that this is an accurate birth date, time, and location for this guy. Okay. And I might point some of that out. Okay, so geocentric Western astrology. This is a snapshot of the tropical zodiac based on his birthday, time, and location. And I'm using a whole sign house system. Okay, I completely support, using Placidus, using other house systems for certain types of astrology. But when it comes to this, when the midheaven, and again, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. I will be pointing out some things that most people should be able to understand, but some things might go over people's heads. I like to see where the midheaven, what house the midheaven is coming through, especially when it comes to something like this, okay, a presidential election. Okay, so let's start by talking about, well, let me just show you this in case you're super new here. These things right here, all these symbols right here, those are the symbols for the planets and the celestial bodies. Like this right here is Jupiter, this right here is the moon, this right here is Uranus, right here is Pluto, here's Neptune, here's Saturn, here's Mars. This is Venus, Sun, Mercury. Okay. And when we go in the wheel just a little ways, these things are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all those things were beaming through onto Robert F. Kennedy when he took his first breath of air. Okay. Now, let's start with the sun. So this right here is the symbol for the sun. Okay. And this right here where it says 27, that's the degrees. He was born at 27 degrees. And this right here is a symbol for the sign of Capricorn. 27 degrees Capricorn, and these are the numbers here in the minutes, and I certainly don't need to put emphasis on the minutes today. But the sun in the natal chart basically will show the sense of identity, who the person is on the inside. Okay, so he was born with the sun in the sign of Capricorn. Now, 27 degrees Capricorn. This is actually a pretty important degree. Actually, I think I'll wait till I point out transits to tell you why. But if you can, just try to keep that in the back of your head, 27 degrees Capricorn, because there's some really important stuff that has gone on at 27 degrees Capricorn just up in the sky. Okay, now, the sign of Capricorn is what we call the cardinal earth sign. When I say cardinal, what I'm talking about is a force that comes through all the cardinal signs, like kind of project forward. And this is in the element of earth, okay? So in astrology, there's either Western astrology, there's earth, air, water, or fire. The earth signs tend to be a little more stable, a little more practical. It's like when you think about those elements, earth is the densest, okay? So this is like a stability that comes through, but with force. Now the combination of this modality and element leads to ambition. Okay, the sign of Capricorn is very ambitious. It's ruled by Saturn, which Saturn up in the sky, amongst other things, mostly when we think of Saturn, we think of discipline, we think of responsibilities. Okay, when somebody has a really strong Saturn in their natal chart, these are the people that, are super disciplined. They, they go to work, they show up on time, that sort of thing. That is the planet that rules the sign of Capricorn. So that has a lot to do with this Capricornian energy, which can manifest with stability, ambition, discipline, and taking care of responsibilities. It's represented by, most commonly, represented by the mountain goat. In real traditional ancient astrology, it's a sea goat, but I really feel like the mountain goat helps people get the energy of this sign of Capricorn. Because the mountain goat, well, first of all, it can butt its way through obstructions. It's strong. Moreover, it can make it to the top of a mountain. If you've never seen a video of a mountain goat climbing up a mountain, it is absolutely wild. Okay, they really do. They're very strategic. They know how to do it. Take advantage of every foothold, climbing up the mountain. Okay, that sign of Capricorn can be like that. And they make it to the top of the mountain to be on top, like a boss. The sign of Capricorn is kind of like the boss of the zodiac. In fact, out of all the zodiac signs, the sign of Capricorn is most directly and most prominently related to the related to the government, related to things that are of authority, authoritarian establishments, and so on and so forth. The sign of Capricorn, out of all the rest of the zodiac signs, really suits that energy the most. Does that mean that every single person who's born under the sign of Capricorn is going to be somehow associated with the government or, have super strong ambition? No, because there's so much more to a person's natal chart. Okay. But the sign of Capricorn in and of itself, and if you look, he's got what we call a stellium. All these things, Mercury, Sun, Venus, North Node, and Chiron, were all coming through the sign of Capricorn when he was born. Okay. And I will break this down not in total amount of detail, but just so you guys get where I'm going with all this. So, and not only that, but the motto for the sign of Capricorn is I use, meaning it's like this sign can, if somebody's got strong Capricorn energy in their natal chart, it's like they can make it to the top of corporate, or they can, you know, say they build their own business, that sort of thing. And they use what they have already, like use what's in their environment already to build with this. In fact, I've heard in some books, I've seen the motto, I build for the sign of Capricorn, but really I think traditionally it's I use, but it uses, instead of being like, well, I can't build a business because I have to buy that first and I don't have the money to buy that. Sign of Capricorn does not have that kind of mentality. It's more like, what do I have to work with here that I can use to build with? Okay. That is Capricorn energy. So this is his sun coming through that 27 degrees of Capricorn. Now, as we can see, this right here is Mercury. Okay. This little yellow character is Mercury. Now, Mercury was coming through 29 degrees Capricorn when he was born. So let's talk about Mercury. Mercury rules basically our mental function. In medical astrology, Mercury has a huge influence on the entire nervous system, really. Mercury is considered the messenger of the gods. Basically, we are always and constantly receiving information. You're receiving information right now as you're listening to me talk. This information is being brought in. It's Mercury bringing that information in, storing it somewhere into your consciousness. And then, let's say you want to go tell your friend about this video tomorrow. Mercury goes in and finds that file and brings it back out for you to communicate, okay? Mercury influences communication amongst many other things, but hopefully you guys are getting the picture here. That's what Mercury's job is in all of us, not just in Robert F. Kennedy, in all of us. That's what Mercury's job is. Whatever zodiac sign Mercury was beaming through when we are born will say a lot about how our nervous system works, or how quickly, you know, sometimes people have super nervous energy going on, but they might have a hyperactive Mercury. Okay. But for Robert F. Kennedy, it's coming through 29 degrees Capricorn. Now, first of all, 29 degrees, that is an anaretic degree. And that very well could, is going, I will point out the points and aspects that make me realize, wow, with the neurological condition that he has, spasmodic neurological condition, I will point that out, and Mercury will be one of the key players in that, but I need to kind of, I'll come back to it, okay? So the 29 degrees, anaretic degree, the last degree of the zodiac sign, sometimes that could be a trouble point, the 29th degree. But regardless, and not only that, okay, here's what happened. Here's the sun, here's Mercury. He was born when Mercury and the sun were conjunct, meaning very close together. And in fact, Mercury was going pretty quick at the time he was born. I'd say that Mercury was probably, it was a Cazimi, maybe 2 or 3 days before he was born. Cazimi means sun and Mercury were in the exact same spot. We can see they're about 2 degrees away from each other. So that's not exact, but they're still close enough together to where they are blending together and wanting to work as one. Okay, it's like if you think about it this way, if I'm holding a flashlight here, but this flashlight influences your nervous system and your communication skills and your mental function. That's what that light is beaming on you, and it's having that influence on you. And then I've got another flashlight here that influences your inner being. It says who you are on the inside, your sense of identity. And when these things are very close together, which certainly not everybody's born with Mercury right next to the sun, they blend together and work as one. So with that said, this, especially since Mercury had just moved past the sun and was moving pretty quickly, these guys are working pretty strongly together, which could lead to a hyperactive nervous system, but I don't think it does in Robert F. Kennedy. And the reason I don't think it does, like for some people, it totally could. If you think about those 2 flashlights, it could totally be like, ooh, overactive nervous system. But when we talk about the sign of Capricorn and it being slow, steady, ambitious, and practical, instead of like some of the air signs can be hyperactive. Some of the fire signs can be hyperactive. But this earth element kind of slows it down. Okay. And not only that, but this right here is Venus. Okay. Where the little green characters. Now, Venus was also pretty close to the sun. Not the sun and Mercury about 2 degrees away from each other. The sun and Venus are about 3 degrees away from each other. Okay, so these things are blending together as well. Okay, now Venus, most people know Venus is the planet of love. Okay, Venus is Aphrodite in Greek mythology. Aphrodite is this beautiful, archetype. And Venus influences beauty, charm. It's like Venus is very strongly associated with women, okay, or females in general. And this can definitely, I think that also has a part in Venus can, if something's going too fast, Venus can kind of tone it down. Okay, if something is too hot, Venus can cool it down. If something's too cool, Venus can warm it up. That's just how she works. She brings ease. Okay, that's what Venus is all about. She wants harmony, but again, associated with females. And when he was born, this right here is the North Node. Okay, so the North Node is, we'll describe it as the pump that pumps celestial energy in. Okay, and in the natal chart, well, it's basically, some astrologers will refer to the North Node as like the destiny of somebody. It's like the direction we're going in. Okay, always, here's the North Node. Exactly opposite the North Node is something called the South Node. Okay, you can see they're the same symbol, except the South Node looks kind of like it's upside down. Okay, the South Node is more like the drain point. That's where energy goes out. And I'll definitely go a little further into detail, but just for right now, so you get the idea, this North Node, it's like the direction he's going in, it's how he receives energy. And when he was born, the North Node was pretty much exactly conjunct. It was in the exact same degree. It's just off by 23 minutes. Venus being right next to that North Node. So that means he receives kind of like an extra dose of this Venus energy. Okay, that kind of leads me to believe, I mean, I would imagine, I don't know for sure, but I think he's probably married. That's my guess. But let's say back in the day, he probably had a lot of luck with the ladies. Another example of this, I think it's Elvis Presley who's had Venus right next to the North Node, and that brings a feminine energy into your life. All sorts of wonderful things can come from Venus conjunct the North Node. And in fact, Venus has a lot to do with, again, romance and charm. Okay, now the sign of Capricorn, if you were to just look up keywords to describe the sign of Capricorn, you're probably not going to find the word romantic. Okay, you'll find ambition and strength and all sorts of things. But he's got a little bit more of like this charming energy that comes through here than the average just regular Capricorn energy, because that Venus is conjunct the North Node. Okay, now also this right here is Chiron. Okay, Chiron is generally described as the wounded healer or the wounded warrior. Okay, Chiron has a very big influence on, generally speaking, wounds that come from early childhood development. It's said that it's our karma. This is potentially wounds that are coming from a previous lifetime, something along those lines. With Chiron very close to his North Node as well, this very well could indicate he had to go through something traumatic. And I don't know how old he was, but I do know that his father and obviously his uncle were both assassinated. At least that's what we're told on the news. That's something else I need to point out, is I question everything that's on the news. In fact, I would never be like, oh, that's definitely not true because it's on the news. But a lot of times I'm going, I don't know what if they're telling. There's always stuff going on behind the scenes, in my opinion. But let's say this is all totally real. That the assassination of a father when you're young, would, for anybody, would be, create some trauma in there. That could be playing a part because this is all so close together. It's called a stellium when we've got this many planets or celestial bodies all squished up together in the same zodiac sign. It's pretty rare. It certainly happens, but it's not exactly common to be born with all this stuff in the same zodiac sign. Okay. And when they do, when they're all, this is 22 degrees and this is 29 degrees. Okay. That's about a 7-degree difference between Chiron and Mercury, with all these other things shoved between them. They all blend together and work as one. Okay, now this is coming through these things that look like a slice of pie. They're called the houses, but what they really represent is areas of our life where things manifest. Okay, it's kind of like they're themes. Okay, like the theme of our life. And this is the 6th house. If you're watching this on a computer, you probably see a little 6 right there. And that the 6th house is the house of physical health and being of service. Okay, and a little bit of an astrology lesson here, because I feel like a lot of people watch my videos. They're people who want to learn astrology for themselves, which that's what I love to do. I love to teach this stuff. So the 6th house, like for everybody has a natal chart, and as long as you know approximately what time you were born, you're going to be able to see which zodiac sign comes to each house. Okay, so for everybody, the 6th house is the house of physical health and being of service, but it's going to be unique to each and every one of us. Whatever zodiac sign comes through that area of the chart is, going to modify how that house manifests. Okay, and then not only that, but not everybody's born with, some people are born with no planets in the 6th house. I don't have any planets, I don't have anything in the 6th house. But so when this does happen, when somebody's born with a like strong amount of some kind of celestial forces coming through their 6th house, a lot of times there can be health concerns. Okay, but they're also, it's like, they're also, especially if it's a strong sign, like the sign of Capricorn, it could be like, yeah, there was health concerns or is health concerns, but with that comes, I got to take care of my physical body. I got to take care of my physical health, especially Capricorn. It's like, oh, I got to do this. I got to have some discipline and responsibilities when it comes to my physical health. Okay. But it's also very much about being of service. Okay, a lot of times when people have a strong energy coming through their 6th house, they'll want to be of service in some way, shape, or form. The work of service position or whatever it is, they just want to be of service to the world. Now, also, the 6th house can have to do with like day-to-day routines. Something that you can get into a consistent flow of. And with that said, from what I can see, and trust me, I'm not like heavily following what's going on with all these candidates. That's not how I live at all. It's more like just shows up on my feed. I'm like, hey, what's going on here? But I can't spend too much time on it because I don't like getting wrapped up in politics at all. In fact, I generally remove myself from them as much as possible. But from what I can see of Robert F. Kennedy, he really does try to keep himself in good shape. Like it looks as though he's got like a good, strong, like workout routine or something along those lines, which makes perfect sense with all this Capricorn, especially since it's his North Node and his Sun right here, and all of it makes so much sense. Okay, now let's move over here. Let's talk about these guys. So this right here is a symbol for the moon. And when he was born, the moon was coming through the sign of Cancer. This right here is a symbol for the sign of Cancer. Now, the moon influences our moods and our emotions, our intuition, our level of receptivity. Okay, everybody has a moon somewhere in their natal chart. And whatever zodiac sign the moon was beaming through when we were born, so whatever zodiac sign the moon is in your natal chart, will say a lot about how we process our emotions and our moods and our level of receptivity. So the sign of Cancer, this is what we call the moon's home. Okay, the moon rules the sign of Cancer. Just like I said, Saturn rules the sign of Capricorn. Well, the moon rules the sign of Cancer. With that said, the moon is in her own home. And if you can imagine, this is where the moon works very comfortably. Okay, it's a very sensitive placement. Like I said, the moon influences our emotions. The sign of Cancer is emotional because it's ruled by the moon. In fact, the motto for the sign of Cancer is I feel. It's a very sensitive energy that comes through with moon and Cancer. Now, keep in mind, we got to put all these pieces together. It's not like, oh, he's just so sensitive. He's also got this really strong Capricorn energy. So it's both, really. But this is it's like Moon and Cancer people. It's like not hyper emotional. That's probably a little more like Moon and Pisces. It's more like really feeling the emotions. Like sometimes when the moon is born, say in Aquarius or Gemini or something like that, then people will be more like intellectual or think about the emotional situation or analyze it, something like that. Versus when the moon's in Cancer, it's actually really feeling it, okay? Feeling the emotional situation in sort of a raw way, okay? But when he was born, this right here is Uranus, which was about 7 degrees away from the moon, okay? Now, this is still technically conjunct. They're still right next to each other, so they're still kind of blending together and working as one, but not as strong as when we go over here and that Mercury next to the sun and Venus next to the sun, okay? Those things are really tightly conjunct. This is what we would call kind of a wide orb, okay? So they're kind of working independently, but at the same time, they also kind of blend together. Now, with that said, this could potentially manifest as somebody who has, you know, when it comes to the emotions that kick in, something happened, it's a car accident or something, and the spasmodic emotions because the moon and Uranus are close together. That's not, I can't say that with certainty, okay? And not only that, but I was thinking about this. So Uranus influences abrupt things. Uranus influences revolutions. Uranus influences, okay, and there's a good way for people to understand what Uranus influences. In medical astrology, Uranus would influence something that is of a spasmodic nature. And in fact, Uranus, sometimes when somebody all of a sudden gets epilepsy or starts having seizures or just strange spasms in their body, a lot of times we can see through medical astrology that it's Uranus influencing that. Like Uranus hit their sun in a harsh aspect with something else. Okay, but that's what Uranus is like. Uranus is like interferes or disrupts the electrical field. That's what Uranus does. Now, so that's what I'm talking about. He could have potentially, again, I think they're far enough away from each other, and not only that, but I think he's got enough stable Capricorn energy in here to prevent, you know, spasmodic emotions. But I was thinking about this as well. So Uranus also has a lot to do with things that are of a humanitarian nature. Okay, Uranus basically is like the influence of Uranus can be the people coming together to work together as a team and almost like rebel against, say, authority in some way, shape, or form. It's this energy. Uranus influences some things that are rebellious, but it's really about the community kind of energy coming together. And I was thinking about it. There's potential. Again, this could be some sort of you know, optimistic sort of perspective that I'm gathering here, but it could be manifesting as he actually has an emotional, okay, the moon, emotional drive for creating or playing a part in participating or maybe leading into some kind of a revolution. He's got an emotional drive for that. That's something else, especially through the sign of Cancer. Okay, now, this right here is the South Node. Okay, now this is where energy goes out. Now, you know, certainly not everybody is going to entertain the possibility of previous lifetimes. And I completely respect that. I can't prove anything. In fact, I very much had a hard time wrapping my head around how that would be a possibility until I really started to understand astrology and the cycles of eclipses and all sorts of things. That I was like, geez, this, you know, reincarnation thing actually does seem like it could make sense. But of course, I can't prove that. But if you do entertain the possibility of previous lifetimes, the South Node could be said to be very much connected to, say, our most recent past life. Like coming through the sign of Cancer, this could be interpreted as he mastered the sign of Cancer from a previous lifetime. And in this lifetime, he's bringing that with him. He's bringing it with him, but he's becoming more and more Capricornian, especially in the second half of his life. The North Node, unless somebody's really making some very poor decisions, if somebody's just got horrible, they'd be causing harm to other people, those are like if they're stealing, or if they, people will get stuck in their South Node if they're really, being, they're just kind of making some very poor decisions in life. And most people, by nature, start to develop the qualities of the zodiac sign that the North Node was in when they were born. And this South Node will kind of drain away. It's never going to go entirely. It's like the South Node is our instincts. Okay, so if this is the case, that he, let's say that sign of Cancer, again, I feel, it's sensitive, it's emotional. It's like he could have been some sort of, especially since we're 4 degrees away from Uranus, it could be like he was a sensitive revolutionary in a previous lifetime, and he's bringing that with him in this lifetime and going more towards his Capricorn energy and developing more ambition and strength, okay, rather than being hypersensitive. Again, I'm just interpreting what I see here. Now, going back to the neurological condition, the spasmodic neurological condition. So all these red lines that go, those are called oppositions. All these lines that go through the middle of the chart, they're called aspects, but they're really, all this stuff is calculated through geometry. And these lines basically show like where the rays of those celestial bodies were beaming to from a geometric perspective. Okay, and these oppositions, very, very strong. It's like, okay, here's Uranus, which influences, again, spasmodic things, okay, and it opposes, it's kind of a weak opposition, but it's there, especially since all these things blend together, and pretty much all these things blend together, and they're all in opposition together. This easily, again, Mercury has a massive influence on our nervous system and our communication skills. These oppositions here could totally be, especially since this is the house of physical health, could definitely be born with or even develop some kind of a neurological spasmodic condition that it has an impact on the voice. Again, this is Mercury, and especially since Mercury is so close to his sun, that really makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, now, something else I could point out is that Mr. Kennedy was born, let's see, this must have been like the day before an eclipse, maybe a day and a half before, but it looks more like a day before a lunar eclipse. It very well could have been a total lunar eclipse. I did not look into that. I could just see it in the chart because I don't want to go, woo, I don't want to bore anybody or make somebody's brain hurt. But basically, I can see this. Let's actually first talk about what that would mean. When somebody's born really close to an eclipse, getting super like kind of esoteric or metaphysical or something along those lines, this would suggest that there's a very strong connection, especially if the South Node is involved, to a past life. Okay, but it can also just mean that eclipses in general are going to have an even more significant impact on this individual than it would for other people. Sometimes it is said that people can be kind of like considered a little bit special if they're born near an eclipse, okay? Now, again, the reason I can tell it's an eclipse is because a lunar eclipse is because here's the sun, here's the moon. Okay, this is the sign of Capricorn, this is the sign of Cancer. The sign of Capricorn and Cancer are always exactly opposite each other. And that's what happens when we have a full moon. When we have a full moon, it means the sun and the moon are in opposite sides of the zodiac. Okay, so here we have the sun Here we have the moon on opposite sides of the zodiac. That means it's a full moon. But what makes it an eclipse is the fact that the south node is pretty darn close to the moon. In fact, it was even closer at the time. I'm thinking this is probably a total lunar eclipse. The moon was very, very close to the south node for this lunar eclipse. And then here's the north node, which was right next to the sun. Basically, if we have the sun and the moon opposite each other, and the north and south node are very close to the sun and the moon, that is a lunar eclipse. Okay, and not only that, but this would have been a lunar eclipse in the sign of Cancer, the moon's own home. South node lunar eclipse. Ooh, okay, I would love to go deeper into what this means for me, like what I see, but again, I try not to make this too long, and I also don't want to make somebody triggered. Basically, what I see here is somebody who has a kind of a significant role in this lifetime. Okay, this house right here, this slice of pie, is the 12th house, which is the house of karma, the house of spiritual debt, the house of spiritual and mental health. Over here is physical health. The 6th house is physical health. The opposite that, the 12th house, is mental and spiritual health. The house of karma is the most spiritual house of the zodiac. Okay, I don't know. I almost feel like I should have looked into this guy a little more before I went into this, but it's possible that he has some sort of a faith. I don't know if he's religious or something like that. If not, then he might just have some sort of a spiritual practice that he, enjoys, that sort of thing. That very well could be the case, seeing the placements in this chart. Okay, now, I think the thing I want to talk about next is his rising sign. Let's talk about his rising. I'm getting to the most exciting part, I promise. But this is pretty cool to look at too. This right here is what we call the ascendant or the rising sign. Okay, now this, it's basically, okay, it comes through at 2 degrees Leo from Mr. Kennedy. What that means is 2 degrees of the sign of Leo was on the horizon when he took his first breath of air. This is a very, very extremely important part of the chart because it's like the persona. The rising sign is very often called the persona. I like to call it like the lens that we're seeing this experience through. That's basically the rising sign. Okay, so this is coming to 2 degrees Leo. That's 2 degrees and 15 minutes. This is the very, 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 very beginning of the zodiac sign of Leo. So it's like very pure Leo energy. And Leo is like the leader of the zodiac. Leo is courageous. Leo is represented by the lion, which lions are clearly very, very courageous, but they're also super playful. Okay, a lot of like Leo risings that do well taking on a leadership role. Okay. Now, oh my gosh, there's so much more I could go into. It's so hard to refrain from going too deep into this, but I don't want to freak anybody out. So I think I'll just leave that there for right now. Oh, I guess I'll point this out too. Because he's a Leo rising, and if this goes over your head, don't even worry about it. Because he's a Leo rising, the sun rules the sign of Leo. So that means that the sun is the lord of his chart or the captain of his ship. That means he's very, like, whatever the sun is doing up in the sky, whatever zodiac sign the sun is beaming through is going to have a very strong effect on him. The sun in his natal chart is going to be extra strong. Of course, the sun is very influential on all of us, but when somebody's a Leo rising, that's their lord. Okay, that the sun is their lord because the sun rules the sign of Leo. Okay, now let's get into this guy. This is what I'm most excited about. This is when I saw this, I was like, watch. Okay, so this right here is what we call the midheaven. The midheaven is basically like the point. It's not a planet. It's the best way to describe this is it rules over the career and the status and the recognition. Okay, and it's coming through 19 degrees Aries for Mr. Kennedy here. So first of all, the sign of Aries is the warrior. of the zodiac. This is a strong energy. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's ruled by Mars. Okay, Mars is sometimes referred to as the planet of war. Okay, and that doesn't mean Aries people are going to be warlike. They certainly can be. They tend to be competitive. In fact, he's got a competitive place that rules over his career and his status and his record. Like he might be competitive in that area. Okay, but this is also coming through the ninth house, which is actually the house of expansion, the house of higher learning, the house of advanced knowledge, the house that exposes us to things that are far beyond your just average public school book curriculum. Okay, that is this slice of pie, the ninth house. And that's where the part that rules over his career and status and recognition comes through in the sign of Aries. Okay, now, I can't decide if I want to. I got to do the transits. I got to do it because this is what's so crazy. As soon as I pulled up his chart, I went, oh, 19 degrees Aries. That's the exact degree when we had that total solar eclipse back on April 8th. That eclipse was at 19 degrees Aries. And if you've ever watched any of my videos, as some of you know how much I love talking about eclipses because they're so freaking powerful. The eclipses will either pump something into your life or take something out of your life. It depends on what kind of an eclipse it is, and it depends on how it's hitting your own natal chart. Okay. And most people, I just have heard this time and time again. It's like from family members or, you know, people who kind of roll their eyes at astrology. They just don't get it. They're like, well, you have an eclipse all the time. Like, nothing happens on the day of the eclipse. It doesn't happen on the day of eclipse. It can, but it's rare. Usually what's going on with the eclipses is it will trigger something either 2 weeks before or within 2 weeks before the eclipse or within 2 weeks after the eclipse. That's usually the window of time. But eclipses, I mean, truly the energy of an eclipse carries on for about a little over 18 years. Okay, but obviously we have, you know, eclipses every year, and they really do, like, whatever degree of the zodiac sign the eclipse is coming through, that is almost like, it's like the eclipse came up and put an orange traffic cone in that spot and said, hey, guess what, we got a lot of energy going on here for a little while. And there tend to be the eclipse point will tend to be most powerful if there's something that hits, if there's an eclipse that hits something in your chart. It's like really for the whole next year and a half. Again, I'm kind of like 18, over 18 years is that's more like the big window of time. It's not going to be that specific and that strong for the whole of 18 and a half years, but it's when the energy is strongest for that eclipse can really go on for an entire year, really even kind of a year and a half. But a lot of times something will happen approximately 90 days after an eclipse or approximately 180 days after an eclipse, and it will manifest through the area of somebody's chart that it came through. And something will either come in or be taken away. Okay, I hope that made sense. This is probably really difficult for people who've never, you know, watched anything about astrology before. So if we're still here, thank you and bravo. Okay, now I'm going to go to April 8th. April 8th of 2024, and it was right at approximately 11:20 a.m. Okay, now, obviously the chart has changed here. What's going on is this inner wheel right here. This is the exact same thing we were just looking at. Okay, this is his natal chart. There's his moon and Uranus and South Node. There's all that. So it's just smaller. It's smaller, and it's inside of this bigger wheel, this outer wheel. This outer wheel is where all the planets and celestial bodies were on the day of this eclipse, the moment of this eclipse. I got it right. It was exactly at 11:20. I think so, right? It has to be 11:20 or 11:21 a.m. on April 8th, 2024. This eclipse was, okay? Now, and I already mentioned to you, this guy is going to be like more heavily impacted by eclipses because he was born the day before an eclipse. Okay, now this right here is the outer wheel. This is, again, where all the planets and celestial bodies were on the day of the eclipse. And for everybody on Earth, the sun and the moon all of these things, were, this was 19 degrees Aries, this was 15 degrees Aries, Venus was 4 degrees Aries, Chiron was 19 degrees Aries, Mercury was 24 degrees. For everybody on Earth, we were all experiencing this eclipse, the sun and the moon at 19 degrees Aries for everybody. But some people might not have anything in their natal chart in the sign of Aries. And not like that, but it's so if that's the case, it might not be as strong for you. Okay, but then when somebody has something in their natal chart that is at 19 degrees Aries, so go back and show you right here. Here's that midheaven that rules the career and the status and the recognition at 19 degrees Aries. And then I go back to that transit, the sun and the moon and Chiron too were at 19 degrees Aries. Boom. And this was a north node eclipse. This right here, that's the north node. And so again, just follow along as best as you can. I just don't want to make people feel confused. This was a solar eclipse. When I showed you how the sun in his chart, in Robert F. Kennedy's chart, here's the sun and here's the moon, here's the south node, here's the north node. The sun and the moon are opposite sides of the chart, and it was an eclipse. That's because that was a lunar eclipse, okay? When the sun and the moon are opposite each other and near the nodes, that's a lunar eclipse. When the sun and the moon are in the same spot, 19 degrees Aries, and either the north or the south node is right next to them, that's a solar eclipse, okay? Now that, again, that probably could easily go over a lot of people's head, but don't worry about it if you're not fully processing this. Just, again, follow along as best you can. But since this was the north node, right next to the sun and the moon, it's pumping energy in so aggressively in the sign of Aries. Okay, the warrior of the zodiac, right on his midheaven, the thing that rolls over his career, in his house of expansion. His house, this ninth house can have a lot to do with like putting stuff out that gets spread from like vast and wide. Okay, just here's that ninth house that I'm talking about. Opposite that, this third house, that's more like little community thing, like within a few miles away. This ninth house is, you know, across seas kind of thing. So it could be publishing things that go far and wide, or it could just be advanced knowledge of some sort. But most importantly, it's his midheaven that just goes just off by minutes. I'm freaking out about this. Okay, now this again, this is Venus. She was at 4 degrees Aries, not exactly super conjunct with the sun and the moon, but still Venus played a part in this. He's got a, you know, Venus is right next to his sun. Mercury was also right here at 24 degrees Aries, which is pretty darn close. It's about a 5-degree orb, and Mercury is right next to his sun. So he's like receiving all these things that are already of major significance for him in this lifetime. And this right here is Chiron. Okay, Chiron again, the wounded healer. And when I told you, he's got Chiron also in a part of that as part of that stellium. And Chiron, you know, this is just absolutely wild. It's so crazy. Okay, now these guys right here, these red lines, those are called squares. And those squares, they're approximately a 90-degree angle. What they do is wherever they're, so here's the sun and the moon, here's that eclipse, and these red lines, it's like the rays from the eclipse are beaming down to a lot of things down here for him. It's really, it's his Chiron, it's his north node, it's Venus, it's even kind of his sun, not so much, but kind of. Regardless, these squares, basically a square with the 90-degree angle creates a force, okay? A lot of times it can create an internal tension, but it's also a force that comes through. It's almost like a Mars energy that we receive from a square. And so these things were sending forceful rays in cardinal signs, which cardinals, this is Aries is cardinal fire, Capricorn's cardinal earth. Cardinal in and of itself is a force. Okay, probably a lot of tension going on, but really, really strong forces coming through. And then they're also bringing these forceful rays at his moon, his Uranus, really strong to his Uranus, and his south node. This is crazy stuff. Okay, now also this right here, this slice of pie, let's just go back to his natal chart from here. This slice of pie is actually the house of career. So you're not confused. This is the point that rules over career and status and whatever. 10th house, this slice of pie is the area of our life that, you know, when somebody has something that's activating their 10th house, you can see a little number 10 where I'm circling. When somebody has something that's activating their 10th house, a lot of times, depending on what it is, it's activating, it could get a promotion or it could get fired. It depends on what kind of energy is coming through there. But going back to that eclipse, what was beaming through his 10th house was Jupiter conjunct Uranus. Okay, we're gonna have to talk about Jupiter next. Jupiter's the great benefic. Okay, Jupiter influences luck, abundance, wisdom, philosophy, expansion. Okay, Jupiter, they say the great benefic is because Jupiter is said to be like we receive the most beneficial energy from. Okay, and please don't get me wrong, Jupiter can also create, especially medical astrology, Jupiter rules over the arteries and also rules over fat. Okay, things that are that can be expanded to a certain degree. Okay, regardless, Jupiter, hopefully you're getting the picture. Jupiter beams rays that can be very joyful. Okay. Now, this right here is Uranus, which Uranus, again, influences abrupt changes. That's Uranus influences things that say, we're done with the old way of doing things. We want a new way of doing something. We want a revolution. That's what Uranus influences, amongst other things. Uranus is just so dynamic. But that's a big, part of what Uranus's job is, and was right next to, conjunct, Jupiter. Jupiter's the expander. All this is going on in his house of career and status and recognition. Okay. All right, there should we go. Let's go back to just his chart for a minute. Now we kind of talked about Jupiter. This right here is Jupiter in his natal chart. Okay. Jupiter in his natal chart comes through the sign of Gemini, which it's like Jupiter is kind of like the professor, and Gemini is very much a student. So even though I'm not even going to go there. Jupiter can be considered a little bit debilitated in the sign of Gemini, but there also can be really good things that come out of it. And again, I'm just talking about what's in his natal chart. Okay, and this right here is the 11th house, which is it's basically like the house of networking, community, friends, who mutually support each other. Okay, that's associates come through this 11th house. That's the area of life that has to do with our friends and who we're working with. Okay, the 11th house. Now, when I go back, okay, should I go right now? I think I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the transits for November 5th. Okay, so let's do this right now. November 5th, 2024. Boom. Okay, here's Jupiter in his natal chart, the one I just showed you. This is Jupiter up in the sky. If I say transiting, I'm talking about the stuff that's in the outer wheel. It's because it's transiting up in the sky, transiting through the zodiac. If I say natal, I'm referring to what's in his natal chart. So this is his natal Jupiter, and this is transiting Jupiter. He's going to be having a Jupiter return. This only happens once approximately every 13 years. Jupiter takes about 13 years to go through the zodiac. When we have a Jupiter return, it can be a very exciting transit. We can experience things like luck and abundance and wisdom and philosophy and expansion of things. Okay. But that's coming through his house of like networking with other people in this sign of Gemini. So it's really quite lovely. In fact, what Jupiter's going to do is, so this year, Jupiter is going to, again, transiting Jupiter is currently about right here. He's moving along. He's going to cross over Robert F. Kennedy's Jr.'s Jupiter. That's hard to say. And then retrograde back over. Jupiter's going to be on his way retrograding back over. Jupiter will have already he will have had a Jupiter return already. I think it happens in August. okay, that Jupiter will hit 17 degrees Gemini. But then Jupiter goes forward a little bit past that and then starts retrograding back. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. this year will have Jupiter in his chart. Jupiter in the sky go over it and then go past it again and then go over it again. That's it. That's a Jupiter return right there. Okay, now, so we're looking at November 5th of 2024, election day. In fact, let me go back to just his natal chart. I'm going to hear something else I'm going to show you those. Okay, so back at just his natal chart here. This right here is Saturn, and this right here is Mars. Okay, now Saturn and Mars, they're the tough guys, okay? As we already talked about, Saturn rules Capricorn. Saturn's kind of like Mr. Rigid, okay? Saturn influences the responsibilities and the discipline and the structure, but that's in part what makes Capricorn so strong, is because, in fact, in the body, Saturn rules over our bones, our entire skeletal system, even the skin, basically the structure of our body. Our skin is ruled by other things as well, but Saturn really is the ruler of our physical body, again, mostly our bones and skeleton, but also the skin, the things that hold the body together. That's Saturn because he's structure. Okay, this right here is Mars, which Mars rules the medical astrology, the adrenal glands and the muscles. Mars is what makes us go take action. Mars is like revved up and ready to go. That's just what Mars is. I'm not just talking about in Robert F. Kennedy's natal chart here. I'm just talking about Mars's influence. And in fact, whatever zodiac sign Mars was being through when you were born will say a lot about how you put things into action. Okay. Now, for Mr. Kennedy here, when he was born, Mars was coming through the sign of Scorpio, Mars is one of Scorpio's rulers. Just like I was talking about how the moon is in her own home in the sign of Cancer. Well, guess what? Mars is in his own home in the sign of Scorpio. He is revved up. Okay, this is a fired up kind of energy. Probably a very strong willpower. Very strong willpower. And Saturn here, if it was only Saturn in Scorpio, it wouldn't be nearly as strong. In fact, Saturn the sign of Scorpio is very fierce. It's magnetic. It's got a very strong spiritual willpower, the sign of Scorpio. Okay. And if it was only Saturn in Scorpio, some of those things, Saturn can actually almost create like a blockage to some of those things because Saturn is kind of rigid and cold and astringent. But since we've got Mars here too, he's got the two like masculine things, the two things that rule over the strengths within us, Mars and Saturn, coming through this very fierce and magnetic and zodiac sign that has so much to do with, again, like our spiritual passion, our spiritual willpower. And I'm not saying he's like a hyper spiritual guy, but it's, even if somebody's not a spiritual person, they still, say they're not spiritual at all, but they, say they smoked a pack of cigarettes every day for most of their life. And all of a sudden and they're not spiritual, but all of a sudden they're like, I'm doing it. I'm going to stop smoking. A lot of that is spiritual willpower, even if the person is not considered a spiritual person. That's willpower coming from within. Okay. That is very Scorpionic. Okay. So he's got this raw Mars and Saturn, strength coming through that very fierce sign of Scorpio. Okay, now when I go back to these transits for for November 5th, look what's going on here. Here we have the sun up in the sky will be in the sign of Scorpio, 13 degrees Scorpio for everybody. I always thought it was very interesting that the elections always fall during Scorpio season, which Scorpio, it's like Scorpio is a sign of death and rebirth. Okay. It's a sign that it's like when the sun is in the sign of Scorpio, that's when the veil between worlds is said to be thinnest. Halloween falls during Scorpio season. Okay. And so I've always been like, Isn't it interesting that they have the elections like right in the middle of Scorpio season? But regardless, here's the sun up in the sky at 13 degrees Scorpio, beaming on the two things a roll over his stripe. Okay, this is crazy. This is literally wild. Okay, now this is another one I got to point out. So going back to just his natal chart for a minute here, as I was trying to help you guys realize this right here, Mercury at 29 degrees Capricorn. So again, that 29th degree is the anaretic degree. Okay, it's a very, very strong degree. Okay, now when I go back to the election day, guess what? There's Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn, exactly conjunct, maybe not to the minute, but it's like to the degree conjunct his Mercury. Pluto is the influencer of powerful transformation. Pluto is in fact, well, overwhelm people. Pluto influences a death and rebirth process. Okay. As I talked about, the sign of Scorpio is the sign of death and rebirth. Well, one of Scorpio's rulers is Pluto. Pluto and Mars together both rule the sign of Scorpio. But Pluto is what makes that Scorpio energy the sign of death and rebirth. In fact, Pluto like rules the psyche. Pluto wants to destroy, but for the purpose of creating a new, more powerful something than what was there before. More powerful than what was there before. That's what Pluto is sometimes referred to as the planet of power. But Pluto certainly doesn't just go like, hey, here's some power I'm handing out for free. No, it's like you have to go through that deep spiritual transformational process. Okay, and I would imagine because Pluto's already done, he went over 29 degrees Capricorn, then he retrograded back, and then he did it again. Now he's doing it again this year. I would imagine that Mr. Kennedy, in fact, over these last 4 years, I would say Mr. Kennedy's been through a lot since Pluto went over all of these things. Sheesh. I wonder how this guy's really doing inside. Anyway, there's that. And not to cap it on the day of the election. This isn't what I'm about to bring up. I'm not just talking about Kennedy's chart. I'm talking about like just up in the sky. What's going on up in the sky? Here's Pluto. Again, Pluto's destructive, but can be a good thing. Okay. Pluto can be very destructive, but can also be empowering. Like, here's some power. If you got to, if you went through the transformational process, now you're empowered. Okay, that's Pluto's influence. Here's Mars. Mars is the planet of war. Mars is the aggressor. Mars is dominant. Mars is fast and furious. And these guys are going to be opposite each other. So again, if we're looking at the outer wheel, that means we're looking at what's just going on up in the sky. And in the sky, it's Pluto and Mars in a very, very strong opposition. That's heavy stuff, man. That's heavy stuff. Probably a lot of, I think there's going to be a lot of commotion. I think there's going to be a lot. And no matter what the result is, no matter like who supposedly wins the election, I think there's going to be a lot of really emotionally affected people that are like, have a meltdown. And I really don't mean to laugh. It's not funny. But at the same time, when since I have been able to completely emotionally remove myself from what's going on politically, I have no emotional attachment to it at all whatsoever. I like looking at the chart and transits. That is when I get to put a smile on my face and just kind of enjoy the whole ride, the turbulence, all of it. Okay, now, another thing that's going on here. So here's back up to his midheaven again. So we're looking at November 5th. We're looking at the day of the election. Here's his midheaven. And this right here is Chiron up in the sky. That would be right on that midheaven. The midheaven again was the career. Chiron, the wounded healer, coming through that sign of Aries. This could be potentially good for him, for everybody, I guess. And then here's Uranus, which again, Uranus brings the revolutionary changes. Uranus moves very, very slowly. This right here, this is all the sign of Taurus. This is a symbol for the sign of Taurus. Uranus moved into the sign of Taurus in 2018. I think we still have another year and a half of basically, year and a half of Uranus going to the sign of Taurus. So, but Uranus creates a revolutionary change. Again, Uranus says out with the old and with the new, and could be very zappy at the same time. Okay, Uranus can go, and not only that, but Uranus is going to be in retrograde too at this. Oh my gosh, Jupiter is going to be in retrograde. Uranus is going to be in retrograde. Neptune is going to be in retrograde. Pluto won't be in retrograde. That's okay. At least we got something going on here. Saturn is going to be in retrograde. A lot of retrograde things going on November 5th. But okay, Uranus is zapping things in his house of career and going in retrograde. And when Uranus is in retrograde, it's like even more spasmodic. Okay, it's even more making things go crazy over here up in your house of career, Mr. Kennedy. And these rays, these blue lines right here, those are called trines. Those are approximately 120-degree angle, and they create harmony. So we've got Mr. Revolutionary Uranus being harmonious rays, really to his Chiron, his North Node, very much his Venus, and also his Sun. These blue rays is in his house of career. So you guys are getting this. Uranus changes and strange things in his house of career, but sending harmonious rays at his inner being, his destiny, his, his Venus, all sorts of things going on here. Okay. And not only that, but these green lines, these are called sextile. They're approximately 60-degree angles. So there's Uranus. Again, we talked enough about Uranus. Uranus in his house of career, making weird changes, beaming this sextile, this opportunistic connection to his South Node, kind of to his Uranus too. Oh my gosh. So yeah, Uranus is kind of making sextile with his own natal Uranus. So, oh gosh, a lot of opportunity, a lot of really, really strong stuff going on. Going back to his ascendant, his rising sign. Here's Mars, transiting Mars. It's at 0 degrees Leo. Mars is getting really close to his ascendant. I'm going to say probably like 3 days, maybe, and then less than that, Mars will go exactly conjunct with his ascendant. Mars brings action. This is the lens to his experience here. And Mars is shooting rays of, aggressive energy. And I don't mean like he's going to be aggressive. It's more like okay, let me give you this example. When Mars goes over my ascendant, my rising sign, which is what we're talking about here, I have this like, I gotta go. I got stuff I gotta do. I'm ready. I got the action. I'm ready to run. Okay, so there's that. Gosh, there's so much more I could go into. Oh, this is what I want to do next. I'm going to try and wrap this up fairly quickly here, but I want to point out a couple other things here. I'm just trying to run through my head. Did I cover everything I wanted to with that? I think I did. But now what I want to point out is Robert F. Kennedy, maybe I won't pull up the chart. I won't pull up the United States chart. It'll take too long. I'm going to flip them back and forth. But the United States, America, has its own natal chart, okay? And most astrologers, we use the July 4th, 1776 as the birthday of the United States, okay? And so in that chart, in the United States natal chart, some of you, if you follow any kind of astrology at all, you have had to have heard about America's Pluto return, which was it was, let's see, it's been 2 years. It's kind of just been, it kind of had 3 of them. What it is Pluto in the United States natal chart. Okay, now think about this. Pluto, the bringer of powerful transformation, death and rebirth, power, is for the United States. It's in the United States house of money, material possessions, and values. Okay, just think about that. Pluto, we're talking about Pluto influences, is in the United States natal chart in the house of finances at 29 degrees Capricorn. Remember this? His Mercury, oh, sorry, hold on. No, Pluto's at 27 degrees Capricorn. That's what it was, 27 in the United States natal chart. I'm tempted to pull this up, but it would take me too long to find it, and I'm going to see it all day. The United States natal chart, the Pluto is at 27 degrees Capricorn. Okay. Robert F. Kennedy's sun is at 27 degrees Capricorn. So basically, if I was to do something called a bi-wheel and pull up the United States natal chart and put Robert F. Kennedy's chart on top of it, we would see Robert F. Kennedy's sun, his sense of identity, would be to the degree exactly conjunct the United States Pluto in the house of finances. Okay. And that America's Pluto return, we just had this very powerful transit. Basically, what it means is here's Pluto in the United States natal chart. Pluto up in the sky came up and crossed over it and then retrograded back and then moved forward again. Okay. That is why it's called a Pluto return. Pluto takes about 248 years to go around the entire zodiac. Okay. That is a big deal. With humans, unless you're some like magical human that lives somewhere that we don't get to see you, most humans are not going to live to be 248 years old. That said, we don't, as humans, experience a Pluto return in our own natal chart. But when we're talking about the United States of America, it's been 248 years. I guess it's been like 250 years now for the United States since we had that 4th of July, 1776. Okay, but Pluto, it's just, oh, I hope you guys are picking up what I'm laying down here. This is really, really strong stuff since we just had that Pluto return in the United States natal chart. And here's Robert F. Kennedy's sun at the exact same degree as that Pluto. That's just crazy stuff to me. Not only that, but the United States sun, okay, is at 13 degrees Cancer. That's where Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s moon is. So his moon is conjunct the United States sun. Okay, for you guys out there who've been following astrology for a little while, you get this. Like, this is wow. Okay, this is a strong connection here. I think also our United States Mercury is at 24 degrees Cancer. So South Node would be conjunct the Mercury, United States Mercury and that natal chart. I mean, this is just wild stuff, you guys. This is wild stuff. I think I better wrap that up there. I think I've probably been going for about an hour, maybe a little longer. If there's anything you guys see here that I may have missed, like I said, there's so many things that I could go way, way deeper. I could go into his zodiacal releasing. He's got Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is having, I think it's a level 3 or level 4 peak period using zodiacal releasing. He's also his annual perfections. I mean, we could go into all his progressions. Where's his moon? I think his moon, I think his progressed moon, using secondary progressions. I think his progressed moon is currently at 27 degrees Capricorn. That is so crazy. There's so many things that I can go into. And I'm just, I don't want to overwhelm anybody over, you know, I don't want people to get bored. I also want people to try and follow along as best as they can. But if you see something that I didn't point out, please feel free to leave a comment because I love reading your guys' comments. I really do. I always go back and reply to people's comments. If I ever miss somebody's comment, I am truly authentically sorry because that's something that I try to interact with you guys here in the comment section on YouTube. So please feel free to leave a comment. And then if you would like for me to break down your natal chart and transits, you can schedule an astrology reading at erinwageastrology.com. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. Okay, guys, thanks so much for listening. And until next time, namaste to all of you.